Welcome back, everyone, to the long-awaited return of our Star Trek Lower Decks Fake Nerds Watch. We're going to be talking about the last half of the season, episodes 5 through 10. Just kind of generalities, just kind of getting our final thoughts out there as the season has come to a close now at this point. Scheduling conflicts, general interest kind of prevented us from coming back for more, but we are here because the finale was really cool, in my opinion.
Yes.
I am Brandon T. McClure. With me on this journey, on this trek, if you will, is Xander Jaque. It's an audio show.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, no, I think I just wave, and even in audio, they'll understand. Oh yeah, he acknowledged.
And Travis Alexander, how are you, sir?
Hey.
All right, so why don't we get into it right away? So this is episodes 5 through 10. Was Empathological Fallacies, Parth Ferengi's Heart Place, A Few Badgeys More, Caves, The Inner Flight, and Old Friends, New Planets. Those are the episodes we're going to be covering. So let's just talk generalities, the final half of the season. What did we think of this season of Lower Decks? Who wants to go first?
Sure, I'll start us off. So I think I said the last time that I was on one of these episodes that one of my fears going into this show was that none of the characters were ever going to develop. They were going to fall into that adult cartoon or adult animation style, the Family Guy, South Park, all that kind of stuff, where everything gets reset back to the status quo at the end of every episode. None of the characters ever grow. And I especially was afraid of that with Mariner, because Mariner kind of got on my nerves in the first season. And then later on, I've come to now she's one of my favorite characters, but that's because they have let her grow. And I think that the second half of this season, more than any of the other seasons, we really dive into what makes Mariner tick, what is her motivations, why is she the way she is, and the fact that they were able to bring in some of the most beloved parts of the next generation into the reason why she is the way she is just makes her even more compelling to me. And I just love the fact that they were able to do that.
Xander?
Oh boy. I think at large we've all mentioned Mariner a lot. But I think that's because this season is so focused on her. Just, I think, more than the rest of the crew. Because it is such a large character shift that she is consistently undergoing the whole season. Because there's a sense of oh, but we already learned this lesson. You already had this interaction. Why isn't it sticking? And that a whole part of the ending of the season was her putting herself in even more danger than usual, because there's that internal fighting, that internal pushback to changing kind of a core belief that she has about herself. And the way that it's handled and it taking up so much time, I think just really puts a focus on how big of a change that is for this character.
Yeah.
So wonderful in that aspect, in my opinion. I think I want to say 90% of this season was an absolute banger.
I would agree.
Which is hard for, I think, any show to do. Even really good shows that I like are yeah, it's mostly good. There's some dips, but it's solid. No, this is again, except for some very few moments, really, really good. I love that they did an episode where it was kind of a bottle episode with flashbacks and of stories we've never seen. I've always kind of liked that trope. So it was really fun. I think that's probably on the upper end of the episodes for me this season. Just kind of showing the crew has been growing into themselves, which means they've been growing apart because they need time by themselves to grow as a person, but still being nope, we're still friends. We're still the crew. This doesn't change. even with Tandy leaving at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly with the both of you. I think this season was great. I think there's really only one episode that I wouldn't even say I dislike it. I just kind of liked it less than the others, and that's the one with the Betazoids. I think that one's kind of fun. It's a good time. There's some good stuff in it, but overall, I'm not really, that's not one I really kind of like think back to in the season and be like, hell yeah. But for the most part, I think a lot of the season really nails exactly what it's trying to do, which is the same thing we all picked up on in the first episode. This season's about growth. It's about moving on from the lower decks and becoming a Starfleet and like furthering their Starfleet careers. Something that I think if I remember, we all were just kind of like, I've never seen an animated show do this before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exciting, and I want to see where that could go, and if they could pull it off, holy shit. Travis mentioned really, really well. One of my favorite things about the season that I never saw coming was that they tied the show to its namesake,
Mm-hmm.
which is the episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, one of the best episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation, Lower Decks, which everyone was always pointing it out, like, oh, remember there was this Next Generation episode called Lower Decks, and the fact that they just were like, yeah, there's a reason why the show is called Lower Decks. It's because Mariner is informed by that episode. I was like, genius.
Yeah.
Genius.
The fact that, and we can go into it if we're going to break down some of the episodes individually, but the fact that they were bold enough. Let me say that they were bold enough to take such a beloved episode from The Next Generation, put it in this show, which, arguably, like, it is very popular among, it has its fan base, us included, but there is that vocal minority of Star Trek fans that's like, how dare you make Rick and Morty on Star Trek? And the fact that they were like so bold, it's like, I don't care. We're going to tie this into one of the most beloved episodes and make this character of Cedo, her, like, the fact that she died, even more impactful. Like, it was such an impactful thing in the Star Trek universe already. Now we're bringing in and showing, oh no, it spreads beyond just the Next Generation crew. It goes out even further into the universe of Star Trek. And I just love that. I thought that was so amazing. And I just applaud the creators for being so bold to do that.
I want to also just shout out, because you mentioned Cedo, definitely. The actress who plays her does come back to voice her, and it's her first acting role in almost 20 years.
Yeah.
And I think that's awesome. The fact that she had retired from acting, it was apparently her choice, as far as I've heard. She decided to not act. But she returned to do this because it was that important. One of the things that I really like about Mike McMahon is that he doesn't bring back a character unless he could get the actors to voice him, which is incredibly funny, because Nick Locarno is in this episode,
right,
voiced by his original actor, who is also Tom Paris.
Which is all, yep. And there's so many there's so many inside jokes about that, and there's so many comments, and I just love it, and memes being made of it, and everything. I really love how much this show is not afraid to tell a joke that is like, could be world breaking and universe breaking, but at the same time, still like, no, this is the fans. Like, this is obviously for fans. Fans would be making this comment, so we're going to make the comment for you. And I love that.
They have the same face. They're identical. Like, had me like dead on the floor.
It was great.
I really appreciate that, like, Robert Duncan McNeil, that's the actor's name. I really appreciate that, like, instead of just like recasting Nick Locarno, making it a voice alike, because Robert Duncan McNeil had already been on Lower Decks as Tom Paris a couple seasons ago. And I have his plate. I can't show it to you because it's up there, but I have the plate. And like, that's really cool. But like, to be like, hey, do you want to come back again, but as a bit character you played on one episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, that has never been mentioned again,
right,
is just really cool. And I think it was so unexpected, and it's such a really fun way to play with Star Trek continuity and really pay off fans and but not be beholden to nostalgia, but kind of like
Right.
this is a story thread that I can pick up and do something with, and it felt very natural and very like we've talked about it before. Star Trek Lower Decks is the reference Star Trek show. It
Right.
throws out references left and right, but the way that Nick Locarno doesn't feel like a cheap like Leo meme, right? You know, the
Mhm.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood meme. It doesn't
Yeah.
feel like that. It feels like, holy shit, this character is back and he's the bad
Yeah.
guy. What a
He's
weird,
still
what a
out there.
cool.
What has
Yeah,
he been
exactly.
doing? Yeah. No, I
Exactly.
totally agree with that. And one of the things that I love about that is that it pays homage not just to the show, the episodes that Sito was in, both, you know, and that Nick was in, the original one and also the Lower Decks one that followed up from that.
Yeah.
But it also pays homage to what the creators and the writers working on Next Generation had initially planned. Like because Nick Locarno was supposed to be in Voyager. Like they wanted to bring that character over, but I forget which producer it was that said it, but one of the producers made the comment that Nick was too far gone. He was too far gone. They would never be able to save him from that. Like they would never be able to redeem him. And so they decided to create a new character, but they brought the same actor back, and that's where Tom Paris come from. So it's like this full circle of coming back around, and now we're doing something with this character that they wanted to do something with. And that also goes for Sito, because there's always been talks, and even on most of the online wikis that you look up her character, it keeps saying presumed dead. There is this ongoing thing in the Star Trek fandom, and the writers themselves have said, we've never shown a body. There's always a chance she could come back, but they've always said, no, that would be too much. It would cheapen her sacrifice. We need to stick to our guns. And the fact that they were able to find a way to both have their cake and eat it too. They can bring this character back in a way that is absolutely shows an impact on the larger universe and how important this character is to the Star Trek story, but also still not cheapen that sacrifice by just bringing her back from the dead and showing that she's been alive this whole time. It was such a beautifully well-written thing, and I just love how it pays homage not just to the show itself, what we see on screen in the Next Generation, but also the behind the scenes, the ideas that they threw out for these characters initially.
Yeah. Xander, you want to say something?
No, not on that. I think that was like really well surmised. There's no like alternate perspective I can give specifically. Aside from the general sort of just crazy way that they're able to incorporate callbacks and characters like this without it seeming that you have had to watch this specific episode and know everything about it for it to be compelling.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It still stood on its own without all the other stuff. All the other stuff is great, and it brings in a whole nother level to like the interactions, the meaning of it all. But even if you're just a fan and watcher of just Lower Decks, because I mean this is a show we've mentioned at large that you can easily go into, and you don't specifically need to get the references, but it might inspire you to want to watch other Star Trek shows.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the position that you're in, this episode still works, it still lands, it's still like impressive. But you know, then somebody hears this podcast and they're like, wait, there was an episode about this in the Next Generation. It was called Lower Decks, and just kind of like that sense of, oh well, now I should check out this episode, and then being like, that was actually pretty good. I wonder if the Next Generation is just pretty good. And that whole thing, it's so well executed.
I will say, I have never wanted to watch Star Trek more, or like the older series of Star Trek more than when I'm watching Lower Decks and they make a reference to one of those. And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that episode. I need to go back and watch it. And so it's like it's just this vicious cycle of I'm watching old Star Trek because it reminds me this new show is reminding me of those shows, and then I'm watching the new show, and it's just like they feed off each other so well. It's just it is really a really great relationship that they've created between this animated, like, something that shouldn't be as good as it is.
Yeah.
It really should not be as good as it is.
No, you said something like you said earlier. There's a vocal minority of the fan base that considers this like Rick and Morty Star Trek, but like that couldn't be further from the truth. Like watching an episode of Rick and Morty, watching an episode of Star Trek Lower Decks, they couldn't be more different.
Right.
They have the same animation company and some of the same animation, some of the same humor. Because Mike McMahon has worked on both, and Titmouse is the animation studio for both. But like, this is so purely Star Trek in a way that just like it's not Rick and Morty in the sense that like it's just trying to make a good, funny, referential Star Trek show, and oftentimes it succeeds.
Yeah.
And I mean, it plays. I mean, they're so not that it's just they're different, but they're so fundamentally informed by different attitudes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Rick and Morty is at its core very cynical.
Yeah.
And very kind of like, yeah, and Lower Decks and Star Trek at large is just very optimistic. Very like
because the people who are controlling both are so different because like Dan Harmon is a very cynical person. So that goes into Rick and Morty, whereas Mike McMahon, I don't know if he is cynical. It doesn't seem like he is. He's got a similar sense of humor to Dan Harmon, but like he knows Star Trek. He's a huge Star Trek nerd, and so he knows that Star Trek at its core needs to be hopeful, not cynical. So I think you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah. Oh, and also to mention, and this goes a little bit outside of like just this episode, but I think it goes into like Lower Decks at large. There was a lot of buzz about Lower Decks not really going much further than this.
Yeah.
And being kind of like, oh, is this? There were a couple articles where we were like, is this the end of Lower Decks? Is that with all the stuff getting canceled, with all like Paramount's movement into other things, is this going to be it? And then I was like, oh, okay, they're already working on season 5. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
at least there's that. Thank God.
Because I think Star Trek Prodigy like burned a lot of people. Star Trek, not Prodigy like as a show, but like losing that show. The fact that they were working on season 2 and then Paramount Plus canceled it. Now, obviously, it was shopped to a different network. It's now going to be on Netflix, which is nice. I'm very happy about that. But like the fact that Paramount Plus was like, yeah, you know what? We renewed you, but we've changed our mind. Made every subsequent Star Trek decision, whether or not Lower Decks gets to season 5, Strange New Worlds gets to season 3. Is there Star Trek Legacy? What's going on with that Section 31 movie? All of that becomes like how much of that is actually happening at this point.
Yeah. And I was thinking about this, that if season 5 ends up being the last season, whether they plan it that way or if that's just because of studio, at least it feels like this show has lived long enough that they've earned that complete end. Like they've earned that end because they weren't canceled in season 1 before people got to really know these characters. Like we have now seen the characters grow. We've seen them move. And I like one of the creators even asked, is like, well, how far can we take the show that's called Lower Decks when all the characters are moving on from the Lower Decks and they're moving up and up, as they get promoted? And it's like, is it still Lower Decks at that point? Should, the show continue to that point? So, it just feels like, at this point they've kind of earned it. So if it does end up ending, I'm not saying I want it to, but if it does, I at least feel like, they've actually given us enough time to love these characters, and they've given us enough stories. I mean, shoot, we've had 3 seasons more than the original series, so it's like we've had enough time that they've kind of earned that completeness.
Yeah, I think the season really positioned them in a place where it's like, if there was just one more season, that it very realistically ends with them being lieutenants and being like in different things, or even like a jumping a few years and having like Boimler as a captain and Mariner is number one or something. And it just it's like it's finally positioned
part of the holodeck.
Yeah, exactly. It's positioned itself to be like, cool, we can, if we want to or need to, wrap this up. I think my point I think my point into being sort of distressed about it ending is because Lower Decks and Strange New Worlds really have started to set a new tone for New Trek. And it really feels like, oh, we're finally moving in this direction. Don't stop and then have us like revert to what we were doing before.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's actually a real possibility. I don't know how much Paramount Plus is a struggling streaming service. Like a lot of streaming services right now, Paramount Plus is struggling. But they struggle a little bit more because they've really only got like Yellowstone and Star Trek, and nobody's watching either. And you think about how Netflix will sometimes do like sequel shows. Like there was Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous, and coming next year is Jurassic World Chaos Theory, which is the sequel show. So it's going to have the same characters. I propose Paramount Plus if they want to cancel Star Trek Lower Decks at the end of season 5, and we have a lovely ending of them being promoted, we then transition to a new show called Star Trek Upper Decks with the same characters for going up the ranks.
Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to mention when we were talking about the show, though, is we talked about how referential the show is, and it's one of the things. I don't think it's too much to the detriment of the show. I think it's the perfect amount as a Star Trek fan, because it's like a lot of times I mentioned it, it's like that's the joke I would have made while watching it, and they made it for me. It's like we're kind of having this conversation as a fan, as Star Trek fans, but I don't want people who might be listening to this and who are still on the fence about Lower Decks or still haven't made up their mind about it to feel like, well, it's just a show that references the other better Star Trek. Like, because the new characters that they also have created for the show, besides just the Lower Decks, I mean, the internet went nuts for Moopsie.
Yeah. Moopsie's great.
Like you cannot say that this show does not have a far-reaching fan base when for a week, even I think we even mentioned it, that the next episode had come out and that people were still talking about Moopsie, the previous one.
It's the Moopsie superiority, man. Moopsie rules.
I mean, talking about little characters, like friggin' Badgey coming back.
Oh, all about that. God.
Him ascending to godhood, joining the like space koala. Oh man, what a way to like fix that whole like, okay, but how does this end? How does he like see the error of his ways?
He is an AI that becomes so powerful that he ascends to the realm of the whatever cosmic koala is controlling the Star Trek universe.
And even like Peanut Hamper.
Peanut Hamper,
Peanut Hamper is such a one-note character, but yet somehow they make her work. Every time she comes back, they make her work.
Yeah.
And then the episode where it just, you find out they planned this whole escape of the prison that Peanut Hamper and all the other psychotic robots and AIs were in, and then you find out she just wanted to go back to her family, and that she's just going to stay there and try to learn what it's like just to be herself. And I thought that was a really great send-off to a character that isn't necessarily my favorite. I find her a little grating, but I was like, that's great. That was great writing to make me care about this character.
Yeah.
But also interesting to go back to that space station from Star Trek The Next Generation.
Yes.
And exocomps are just running it now.
Yeah.
That is all that's there is exocomps.
Yeah. No, I also love that episode because Boimler is so confident the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
He's so just like, yeah, okay, let's see where this goes. Like, there's no panic. He's just kind of like in control of the situation.
Right. Play out.
Yeah.
What was the
Tendi with sand was
Tendi
also,
with sand, exactly.
Yeah.
Tendi
How
with sand,
excited
just
she is.
like
Like,
it just amazing.
yeah, I love Tendi. Oh, Tendi and Rutherford also have a blossoming romance in this season.
And it's that will they, won't they, you know, Ross and Rachel type thing. That you know, I love that. I love that they have such a strong friendship that it honestly could just stay that way, and we would not feel disappointed.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it feels real enough. The development of these feelings and the fact that Rutherford is such a clueless, you know, well, both of them are really clueless to their own feelings. And so just like, you know, if it does blossom into something else, I wouldn't feel disappointed about that either. But I really do kind of hope that they pull back and they're just like, no, we're just good friends and we're just going to stay that way.
Yeah, but I also appreciate the kind of this is they do have feelings for each other, but they don't really know what to do with that because it ends with her on top of him in a Jeffries tube.
Right.
Like, and they're just like, this feels right.
Yeah.
They're definitely into each other, and like it could, like, I think Travis is right, it could go either way if they want to do either one, but like they've always been so cute together as friends that like I'd be down for them to try a romance, and I hope it would work out. I don't know if it necessarily would, but I like those two characters a lot.
I mean, I can see an episode in season 5 of them trying to see, you know, like go on a date or something and being like, by the end of it, just friends, and everybody's like, wait, so you're just fine being friends? Like, yeah, we just prefer this.
Yeah,
like
and
like there's.
And that's what the episode kind of does too, because when Miglimo is like, these are the two best friends on the Cerritos, and all the Ferengi are like, because they're like the whole thing, and so and they like, so what do? They try to convince the Ferengi that Miglimo is in a throuple with them.
Right.
It's just insane.
That was
so good.
Crazy episode. No, I think that, you know, and one of the things that, and this is just, you know, putting writing out there if the writers wanted to do this, and I don't know. I don't necessarily really want to speculate too much on what they want to do because they can do whatever they want with these characters. But it would be fun to see them try this romance, try a relationship, and they put so much pressure on, you know, oh, we're actually dating, so we have to act like this, we have to act like that, and then they finally realize, well, no, why can't we go back to the way things were? Well, does that mean we're still dating? It's like, well, actually, I don't know, because like, isn't a relationship just supposed to be two great friends coming together and you know, having this deeper connection? It's like, why can't it be the same thing? Why can't it be both?
In my opinion, the only difference between a good friendship and a good relationship is that one of them has sex, one of them doesn't.
Yeah.
And it could be a little grating on the friendship to have sex, but you know what? You know, that's what it is. What it is. Anyway, I really liked the season overall. Actually, I'm thinking about like Badgeys, Gucci's part of the whole thing. I think that again, we go in the same episode that we're actually talking about right now with the relationship with Rutherford and Mariner, not Mariner, Tendi. Mariner has this whole like kind of thing with this other Ferengi where she's being very self-destructive, and the Ferengi is like, you're too much right now. Like I can't deal with you. And Boimler is introduced to capitalism. With infomercials and
reality TV
shows. I love that the Ferengi have made 21st century the 21st century United States. It's really funny.
Yeah, the height of capitalism. It's like they just made it the whole planet.
The Ferengi was really fun. Caves is. I want to shout out Caves also.
Caves,
because like, I love every single flashback being set in the same cave set. It's so funny.
Yeah, it makes it feel like they ran out of a budget when there is no budget to run out of, or at least not in the same way that you have.
Yeah.
Like we have unlimited sets we can use because it's just animation. We can put whatever we want onto the screen, but it's like, no, we're going to stick to the same tropes that all the Star Trek shows do, where we run out of the money, so we're going to use the same set over and over again.
Yeah.
Because the joke doesn't work if they change the set, and like they do change it subtly as you would in a Star Trek show. Like there are more like cave passages in Rutherford and Ta'ana's flashback than there are in the other. There's like even a pond in one of them, and so like it's really funny to kind of like every single time go through this flashback, and it's like, oh, I had a baby with Dr. Ta'ana, or I had this. Like
that was so good. Rutherford as a dad was so funny.
Yeah,
so great.
I just like. But my favorite joke is the end of the episode. It's my favorite joke of the season, perhaps in the whole show, because Tendi has been talking about like her cave story isn't a cave story. It's a turbolift story.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's finally at the end telling the story of all four of them in the turbolift. And they're like, yeah, I'm glad we're friends. This is really nice. And then Shaxx just, I'm here to save you.
Yeah, and they all scream, ah!
Just incredible joke. I love it so much.
Yeah, it was such a good, and you know, that episode, I think that might be my favorite episode of the second half of the season. When we're talking, well, I don't know, because the season finale was so good, but that episode, having the characters return, like having the return of the D shift. You know, and having that come back around and showing that they've now kind of that they've also grown, and that the relationship between them and our B shift and how that's grown, and stuff. It's just really, really such a greatly just well written episode, and I just loved it. I loved every bit of that episode.
We also see the return of an animated series alien from Star Trek the Animated Series.
Yeah.
Just thought that was, again, Mike McMahon, Lower Decks does this a lot. They bring in Star Trek the Animated Series aliens that we don't see in other Star Trek shows. It's really cool. I just wanted to say that it was really cool to see those.
I didn't think it would hit me as hard, but I don't think I had laughed as hard the entire season. With the Mariners flashback and the guy's leg.
Yeah.
Yes.
There was just something about it that I lost it every time.
I think that moment probably was the closest the show has actually felt to that, and also the Doctor are the 2 points where it feels very Rick and Morty, but not fully there.
Right.
So,
yeah.
These moments I can kind of get the argument that this is just Rick and Morty in Star Trek, but because those very Rick and Morty, but they never go too far with it.
I think part of the reason I laughed so hard is because it's so different from its usual humor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, so people are like, see, it's Rick and Morty. I'm like, no, it's funny because it isn't. And it kind of is right now.
Yeah.
And I love that there were callbacks, and now get into other episodes, but overall for this season, that we had the archaeologist character that Mariner kind of develops this somewhat relationship with, and then that comes back around. She's in the finale even and stuff, and so they're not just no character in this show is a throwaway character. Every character, even when they make a joke and it's just a one note thing, can always come back and do more in a future episode. And I just love that. I love the way they set that up.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are 2 speeches that I do want to highlight in the final 2 episodes. One of them is Locarno's speech that you were kind of talking about there, to like the lower deckers of the world. Be like, hey, because like the whole mystery of the season was that there is something been destroying all these alien starships, and it was revealed that they weren't being destroyed; they were being towed away because Locarno had convinced the lower decks of every one of those ships to sabotage their ships and mutiny and take over. and so when he's finally got his Nova fleet, he says, lower deckers of the world unite, pretty much. And I really like that he thinks that like Mariner is going to be on his side with it. And she immediately like, don't trust him, he's a freak, they're scary. Like just like runs away with a Genesis bomb. Like what the hell?
I think my favorite moment from that episode was when they throw the big Orion ship into the force field, and he's like, and then what was it, one of the Ferengi, I think, that turns to him, I thought you said it was impenetrable. I didn't know they were going to throw a starship at it.
I love the whole workaround of the Orions are going to give us a warship to get through this Trinar field. And guys, I cannot tell you that there's been a lot of cool Star Trek this season, this year. From Picard season 3, Star Trek Strange New World season 2 had some cool episodes, to this. But I think ramming an Orion battleship into a force field that Boimler was captaining the Cerritos, and then having the senior staff fly through in a shuttle might just take it for me. That might be the most incredible moment of Star Trek this year.
That honestly, seeing Boimler in that captain's chair,
full Riker,
and it being like full Riker, not like nervous in that Boimler way, but not to the way that it's like impeding him.
Yeah.
It's just like, this is part of who I am. It's not going to get in the way of my work.
Yeah.
And God, it was so satisfying to see him in that chair and see like how everything was going. Talking to that before that moment, I was really, really, really expecting everything with like the puffy bird to work.
Oh yeah, me too.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And the fact that it doesn't, and then Tendy's like, "I'll trade me." It just like, it was just like enough for me to be like, "Oh, there's tension."
Yeah. It was subversion, because you'd expect the plan to work. Like, that's the whole point of, like, we always get out of things, we always figure a way out, and it's like, no, this time there isn't a way out, we just have to let it play the way it's going to go.
The whole ending being a homage to the end of the Wrath of Khan is great. Locarno's like, 5 minutes is too long for a timer, please insert some latinum. What do you mean? I have to pay for the bomb?
The one thing I didn't like, though, about that is they named the new planet, or the new system that was created, after Locarno. And it's like, really? It's like, I get the mentality. It's like, well, his essence was kind of used in creating this, but it's like, no, you don't have to name it after him. I mean, he kind of was this megalomaniac, maybe not.
It's kind of like, it would be like naming, it wouldn't be like naming the Genesis planet after Khan.
Right, yeah, and that kind of felt weird.
So my thing with that, which I think where it made sense to me, was that Mariner was trying until the very, very, very last moment to like save him. To be like, there's still that like, just like Star Trek officer in you. There's still that like, that's a part of you. You can still turn this around. And seeing it not work and him shooting at her was really kind of heartbreaking, mostly because of how intensely Mariner believed in him. So to me, naming the planet after him was more of a like, this is what we wanted from you kind of thing. And more of like an homage in that way, rather than being like, this is named after because of the things that you did,
right?
Kind of thing. I mean, there's an argument to be made that I'm reading too much into it, but it feels definitely like more of a, this sucks that it didn't work out better.
Yeah. I totally get that. Brandon, I don't know if you have specific talking points, but if you have a talking point where you want to talk about, I would really like to discuss the voice acting for this season, especially the second half of the.
Sure, very strong. I thought very strong.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the main cast we've talked about. We love the main cast. We love the voice acting. Absolutely perfect. But the guests, we mentioned how they always bring back the actors, and so seeing like Sito and seeing Tom Paris, come back again.
Will Wheaton.
Ricardo. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So
yeah.
I mentioned Will Wheaton. Because Will Wheaton has aged, like we all do, time has passed, his voice does not match Wesley as Wesley was at the time of Next Generation, which is when he appears as his younger self. And it kind of took me out of it a little bit, just because I'm like, okay, this is older Will Wheaton playing younger Will Wheaton, and it's just like it doesn't feel right to me.
I think there's always kind of a line you have to walk when it comes to having actors come back to play a role when they're significantly older, especially in like voice. I think what was it? Something that just ran into this actually, so that I just saw. There's like Doctor Who. So I listen to Doctor Who audio plays a lot. And so like you're able to get like the older doctors to play their roles again because it's an audio format. But because it's audio, you can pretend that they're still the same, they still have the same face. But that doesn't necessarily always work, especially in the sense of like the Sixth Doctor's voice has gruffed a lot in his old age. It no longer sounds like it did when he was doing the show in the 70s. And so like the 80s. And so like so that was always like I don't hear when I hear those like plays, I don't see him as he was in Doctor Who. I see him as he is now. And I think Will Wheaton probably fell into that same trap. And he does try because his voice cracks a lot in the scene that he's talking. But it's a tough line to walk. My opinion is that I'd always rather it's the same actor.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't think there was an alternative to it. I just think that it was just it was one of those things that's like, oh, okay, this kind of takes me a little bit out of it. But to give the show credit, anytime that Jonathan Frakes comes back, he sounds fantastic.
Man, I love Frakes.
Like he somehow is able to make his voice sound like his younger, more energetic self, even though he's older now. And I think that's great.
I think Frakes single-handedly saved Picard season 3 for me.
Oh, yeah.
If I'm being honest, I like Picard season 3 a lot. Don't get me wrong, but like Riker is my boy. Like I love Will Riker with all my heart. He is my favorite Star Trek character of all time. And the stuff they were able to give him in Picard season 3 just like floored me. I was so excited every single time.
Yeah. And speaking of Picard season 3, I got the same feeling from quality aside, and outcome aside, but I got the same feeling when they started referencing Sito, and Sito kind of appeared in flashback, that I got when they brought back and I told you guys before we started recording, James Rowe, Ensign Rowe. When they brought it, it was just like that same feeling of, oh wow, they're actually going to pay off something from the Next Generation that's been kind of this not loose thread, because it did kind of, the story was over, but it's this lingering thing that was left over from Next Generation. It just kind of gives me that same feeling. And
so you brought that up, and I wanted to talk about the second speech that I really like in this season, which is Mariner talking to the Klingon in the inner fight. I think, and in that speech, we learn why Mariner is so self-sabotaging. It's because she doesn't want to be a Starfleet general sending people off to die. She wants to be an explorer. She wants to be an ensign forever. She saw the Dominion War. She saw the Borg. People growing up in the Next Generation timeline have massive scars. The Borg attack of Wolf 359, the Cardassians, the Borg attack again when they attacked Earth that time in First Contact, the Dominion, they have a really rough. And so like she saw and her trauma is all centered around this person, Sito, that she admired. This upperclassman that she admired more than anyone in all of Starfleet, wanted to be like her, and some general sent her to die, in her opinion. And it scarred her to the point where, like, not necessarily that I don't want to be in Starfleet anymore, but I don't want to be the person that sends those people to die.
I don't want to be part of that Starfleet. I want to be part of the Starfleet that I remember, that I know is still here. Like, I like that. I like that she points out that, Sito wasn't this great commanding officer. She wasn't, a Picard, a Riker, a Kirk. She was a lower deck. She was an ensign.
She was an explorer, not a soldier.
Yeah, and she said, and that was good. It was good enough for her, then it's good enough for me. And I love that line. That line delivery was so great.
But it affected me so much because over the course of this kind of new era of Star Trek, through Star Trek Picard, through Strange New Worlds, Discovery, Strange New Worlds to an extent, not necessarily as much, but like Discovery and Picard especially, Starfleet has become much more militarized because of what Deep Space Nine did. Deep Space Nine very much militarized Starfleet because they were dealing with the Dominion War. And I'm not faulting Deep Space Nine at all. I think it is an incredible series that I love dearly. But I think the wrong lessons might have been taken, in the sense of I see a lot of people like this. A lot of people really like this, especially a lot of military people. We have, I believe, falsely planted our military as Starfleet as an allegory for our military, and therefore the problems with our military and the successes of our military are being reflected in Starfleet. But Starfleet is 300 years in the future and is not a military. It's an exploratory force. It is admittedly very powerful starships that can get in fights, but filled with scientists and people don't go to Starfleet Academy to learn how to shoot a phaser. They go to Starfleet Academy to learn how to travel and explore space. And I've been really struggling with this idea of Starfleet is a military. Starfleet is a military. No, I don't think that's true. And what I really like about Mariner's speech is that she also doesn't believe that it should be. Yeah, it's militaristic. It can be. It's good in a fight. But every single time there's a war, they're caught with their pants down. And the reason is because they're not looking for one. Right. They're there to explore. And that's what Mariner wants to be. Mariner wants to be an explorer. She wants to be out there exploring space, not being a soldier. And that's what really affected about Sito. I really appreciated them putting that in this show, and it really affected me. It was such a great moment that I've been thinking about it nonstop since I saw it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been very vocal in how much I enjoy the explorer, more optimistic aspect that Star Trek has.
Yeah.
Which has been lost on me a bit in stuff like Picard or Discovery. I think Picard specifically turned me off a little bit from wanting to watch it because of that. Which is unfortunate, because that's not, really what Star Trek has been for a lot of people for so long. Regardless of if people enjoy this version or not. It's part of the reason I've really been enjoying Lower Decks. It's part of the reason I've really, really, really enjoyed Strange New Worlds.
Yeah.
It's because the focus is back on exploring, optimism. And my greatest fear is that they are only doing that because they're in an earlier timeline.
Mine too.
Yeah.
And that, it's earlier on, so we can be more optimistic. This is what people expect. We can do this. And then anything that goes down the line, I mean, we were even talking about before we started the podcast, Discovery season 4. That down the line, it gets worse. And we're back to militarizing. We're back to war. We're back to all these things that it's I don't want that. I would be super, super okay with just a whole nother branch of the future. We've done it before. Let's do it again.
Yeah.
That's the thing about Star Trek Picard used the destruction of Romulus to like turn Starfleet into a really like isolationist kind of totalitarian look at Starfleet military. And Picard season 1, like Picard is all about like I don't think it does it well, and I don't think it's necessarily wrong to try to do that. But like looking at the faults of Starfleet's not perfect.
Right.
Star Trek isn't about a perfect future; it's about striving for one.
Mhm.
But Star Trek Picard season 1 tries to kind of be that like mirror, like okay, let's really like look at like what the problems with Starfleet are, and I don't think they do it well.
Mhm.
And because they don't do it well, it makes me dislike any attempt to try to do that, even though I don't necessarily think doing it is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I kind of wish that like one of my favorite scenes in Star Trek Picard season 3 is in like the second or third episode, maybe the fourth episode. Honestly, probably the fifth episode. When it's like when they're escaping the nebula that they've learned is alive, and as they're escaping it, it has given it's a nursery. It has given birth to these space life forms, this beautiful space babies, and they're just the cast just the next generation cast just looks at the view screen and just like marvels at the beauty of space and what they've seen, what they've explored, where no man has gone before, and you're just looking at that like that's Star Trek.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
Star Trek. That's what I want to see more of. And
Yeah.
it's such a small moment in what is otherwise I think a pretty good show, but like it was a season. But it was so important to me, so impactful to me, and I want to see that Star Trek more often.
Yeah.
And I think Xander, you're unfortunately right, because in two or 3 years from the point that Star Trek Lower Decks is at right now, Romulus is destroyed.
Mhm.
So we're going to get there, and if the show continues, and I don't want to. I'm maybe we should diverge. Maybe go left.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and we get the hints at that, showing the dark side of the Federation in Lower Decks. I mean,
Sure.
especially with Rutherford, finding out what's happening with Rutherford and what happened.
Yeah.
And
the
so,
Texas class starships from last season.
Yeah. So it's not it's not that it's not there in Lower Decks, but I like how you guys have talked about how the shift in focus. It's not focusing on telling that story. It's saying this exists in this world while we're also telling the story of these optimistic kids who are going out and exploring.
Guys, I just realized what the symbolism of the season 3 finale is. It's the Texas class starships that are fully automated against the California class starships, which are the underdogs. It's like a full-on liberal versus conservative fight.
Yeah.
Boy,
yeah.
It's not subtle, and yet I didn't catch it.
I wanted to, because we were talking. I wanted to talk about the voice cast. And we were mentioning the voice cast, bringing back a lot of these things. And you mentioned Deep Space Nine. Seeing where he went after Deep Space Nine and how he has been getting along, and I love it. And I love that he plays the fool, because Rom is the fool, and he was always the fool in Deep Space Nine. But that it was for a reason. Like, he's actually got a handle on things, is in control more than you think, and understands more than you think because of the way he acts. And so it's just, I love the way they played with that character, bringing that same actor, same voice back, and it was just so great.
We got to see Rom and Lita be the Grand Nagus of Ferengi. By the way, that's also a huge moment in Star Trek history for the Ferengi joining the Federation.
Yeah. And they threw that into Lower Decks.
like insane moment. Like, it didn't, like, obviously contracts need to be signed. It's a few years away, but like the fact that it's like the weird quote unquote Rick and Morty animated show was just like, and this is when Ferengi joins the Federation. You're like, oh shit, okay.
Yep.
Seeing Rom and Lita back was so great. I love Rom. Chase Meridian, I think is the actress's name who plays Lita. She's great also, and she didn't really have a lot to do in Deep Space Nine, but I'm glad that she kind of is able to be at the forefront of this episode to do a lot. It's really cool to see.
And the Betazoid episode you said wasn't your favorite, but I got to give a shout out to the 3 voice actresses that were there. And
all great.
Yeah, I mean, we had Octavia Spencer, I think, did one of them. Was it, or was I?
Oh, let me see who they are, because they are well-known actors.
Yeah, well, one of them is the one from Just Shoot Me and Hot in Cleveland. I always forget her name, but she was one of them because I recognized her voice immediately. I was like, okay, I know who you are. I have watched Just Shoot Me.
Rachel Dratch, sorry, Janelle James, and Wendy Malick is the girl from Just Shoot Me.
Right, yeah, Wendy Malick, yeah. Yeah, the 3 of them were so good. Like they did such a fantastic job of voice acting, and I feel bad because I'm like you. I didn't really like the episode as much, but I did love them and their characters of these just hedonistic. They're Luoxana times 11. It's just like if Luoxana was 100 years younger and was into all this stuff and all the stories that she tells about when she was younger. This is them. These characters, and so I did like their characters, but it wasn't the strongest episode, but excellent voice cast. Shout
out also to the animation, which I think is a vast improvement this season. I don't know if they got a budget bump or whatever, but like it's much more fluid. There's a lot happening in the animation that I really like, and I normally like it anyway, but I think this season they really stepped it up. There's a lot of small details that they didn't need to include. For example, in that Betazoid episode, their pupils are larger than the other characters because Betazoids have larger pupils, which is not something you would necessarily think about if you weren't just super deep cut into Star Trek lore.
Yeah.
And I thought that was cool.
And also we're talking about returning characters, returning voice actors. I know I'm obsessed with that aspect of the show, but that's because I love voice actors. I'm just such a voice acting nerd. But the return of Jack McBrayer as Badgey.
Oh yeah. And Goodgie and who's the other one?
Oh, I don't even know. They were so good, but I just love that they just kept splitting into these different personality types. It was like Inside Out, but in Badgey.
Goodgie is on the Cerritos at the end of the season, which I think is very funny.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do we really want to have him on here?
His name is Logic-y is the other one.
That's the
Logic-y.
Xander,
the very Vulcan coded one.
Yeah. What were you about to say, Xander?
No, just that I love that there's these like little innocuous things thrown in where it's like, Goodgie's just on the Cerritos now.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's not addressed, but they'll readdress it at some point.
Oh yeah.
They have to.
Yeah, like I love how Lower Decks puts in like these little things and you're like, oh, I forgot that they did that. Mm-hmm. And it like comes back around. It's great. It's great.
It feels like such a full show.
Yes. Just to maybe move a little bit towards like the moving towards an ending here. Just because I mean I love Lower Decks and part of the reason that I love it is that you can't talk about it without talking about literally every other Star Trek show.
Yeah.
So much of it is involved because it references so much, which means we get on these big tangents about all these other shows and series and like how it affects the world and how it's involved. It's just it's really cool to see that Lower Decks has been that effective in that aspect of it. There is one moment at the end that I really loved, and that was like Tendi looking back at the Cerritos from the window and just turning around and being like the badass Tendi like face comes in and you're like, oh.
I'm so curious. I cannot wait for the next season because I want to. I love Tendi. It's very sad that she's left the ship. Obviously, it's got to be temporary, right? Like, please don't.
Yeah,
please don't take the same thing as Boy Lore. Oh, that's right. Season 1 ends with Boimler being
with
promoted
Boimler.
to
Yep.
Riker's ship.
Yeah.
And then he comes back like 2 episodes later.
So maybe we're in the same situation here.
Yeah, that's my assumption.
That would actually kind of be an interesting parallel because this is kind of the first season of Lower Decks because they're lieutenant junior grades, so it's like a new kind of reset thing, and so be an interesting parallel. That's what they're doing, and like in a couple episodes, Tendi will be back. But either way, we're going back to Orion, and I'm not sad about it.
Oh no. Yeah, anytime that they go back to Orion or they have something involving Tendi's Orion side of her personality, it's so great.
I love Tendi. She's great. I'm so excited to see what's going on next. In Lower Decks, Season 5 cannot come soon enough.
One more thing that the show ends on that I thought was really great I wanted to talk about, but what's Tavon or the Vulcan, the Vulcan.
Ta'ana?
Ta'ana? Is that it?
Ta'ana.
I think so.
Yeah.
But she actually gets the call that she's been waiting for what is it, this whole season she's been on the show, and she just ignore. Decide to stay.
Really interesting decision. I'm glad she's going to stay because I like her a lot.
Yeah, same. And I've always liked when Vulcans are like 90% Vulcan and like 10% human. It makes like
it's T'Lyn.
T'Lyn. Who the hell's Ta'ana then?
I told you
we were all like Ta'ana. Yes.
Yeah, that sounds right.
It's definitely a name that's in my head.
Is that the doctor? No. Yes.
No, that's the doctor, Dr. Ta'ana.
Yeah, Dr. Ta'ana. Yeah. Okay.
Oh my God, that's why.
Well, their names are very similar, so they can't blame us.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But T'Lyn.
All right.
Okay. Well, great thing with T'Lyn. Love having her, keeping her. I like that she had a little bit of a back seat in the season finale because the season finale is so much about the core group.
As it should be.
Yeah. And I love that she's like part of the group, but definitely like there's still a little bit of a separation.
Right. I'm like, she's not in caves, which is really smart of them not to do because like that should just be about our core 4.
Yeah. And I love that they're able to like evolve with new characters and new things introduced and having their like circle expand.
Yeah.
And still just be them.
I miss Jessica.
Yes, that's the one that Mariner.
That's the Andorian that Mariner was dating.
Yes. I have been thinking that too. I'm like, she hasn't been on in a while, and I love.
I mean, it's like
Jessica.
Bring back Jessica. It's like, I mean, it's like Friends. You know, you have some new character that one of the main cast is dating for like a season and a half, and then they're just gone.
Yeah. Right, but I don't want Jessica to be. to be God, what's that guy's name? Simpsons voice actor was in Godzilla 1998. Hank Azaria. I don't want Jessica to be Hank Azaria dating Phoebe. I want her to be Paul Rudd dating Phoebe.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
I like what Jessica does for Mariner, like being the softer kind of counterpart to Mariner, or showing the softer side of Mariner. That has that, romantic side to her that you don't get to see very often with her friend group. So, I do think we want to see more of her.
And I mean, Mariner's like a more like healthier version of herself now. So, I mean, like maybe a romance would be better. So who knows? Maybe they go back to that. Maybe it's a whole different person. I like the idea of kind of playing with that because Tendi and Rutherford are the will they, won't they. And I love that they're, because of that, able to keep Mariner and Boimler, who feel much more like, at least earlier on, felt much more like the main characters of the show. Now it feels really like the group is the main character, but following these two, the assumption with shows like this is that like, oh, they'll develop feelings, something will happen, they're like but it really is just like this friendship relationship that's like really strong and really great, and that's the driving force in their interactions.
Yeah.
It's really refreshing to see.
One of the things I was disappointed with the second half of the season, and this will just be like some of my final wrap up thoughts, is that they really front loaded the season with Boimler focused stuff. That the second half of the season, and I get it, like you split it. Like the front half is a lot of Boimler, some Mariner, and the second half is some Boimler and a lot of Mariner. And so I get that, but it just, if you divide it up and you watch the first half and then come back and watch all of the second half together, you can kind of feel like a little bit is missing there. Like I kind of want a little bit more towards the end there.
Yeah, I kind of understand what you're saying, although I don't want it to. I'd be concerned about getting it to be where the Star Trek Next Gen films were, right? Where they would split up Riker and Picard every time. I kind of prefer like at least they're always together and not like Boimler's getting the B plot or Mariner's getting the A plot. They're splitting it that way so that the characters are always kind of interacting.
What I was saying was like the first half of the season seemed to have a lot more for Boimler to do and a lot more development for his character, whereas he kind of took a back seat in the second half of the season because we did so much of Mariner and her growth and her motivations and stuff that Boimler was in the background a little bit. I mean, there was I think where he spent the entire time in a single room watching TV.
Right.
So
yeah. I think part of it for me, what makes it like a little bit more okay is that like by the end of kind of the first half of the season, Boimler's like specific arc for that worry has been mostly resolved. So I don't feel like there was a need to like create another issue for Boimler to tackle.
Right.
When like Mariner's right there. So to me, like in that aspect, it makes sense. I get where you're coming from though. And it definitely like is there. I think it just like really makes it easier for the next season to start tackling everything together, like again, instead of the way they split it here. And I like the Boimler at the end is, captaining the Cerritos.
Yeah.
Because they brings that earlier thing into having its own more like real wrap up for that arc. So
also, the end, he was wasn't he the one that was starting the chant, lower decks, instead of Mariner being the one that always starts that chant. He was. So I do love that they did show his growth. But like you said, Xander, his growth was kind of over with. We kind of had his arc at the beginning of the season, so it was left room for Mariners. And like I said, I understand why they split that way. I just, me personally, as a Boimler fan, when I got to the end, I'm like, oh, they didn't have as much for him to do as what, they did earlier on.
Yeah. My last thing I want to bring up is that I really like we brought back the Samuel Clemens debates between Rutherford and Libick. I thought that was brilliant. All right.
Say, boy, you make a mighty fine argument.
I love the Captain Freeman too. Like, why does this work?
Like, just don't try to understand it. It just does.
No, we didn't really talk about like the alien bar. That was pretty cool. We get to see like the weird long faced green alien.
That's in the original series.
Original series. That was cool. Okay, what? Great season. I'm really happy with it. Anything else you guys want to bring up before we get out of here?
No, I think we covered much everything I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
All right. All right, guys. Well, that's Star Trek Lower Decks. It's going to be a while to the next Star Trek show. I guess February is when Discovery is ending, so stay tuned. Might try to do something for that. I don't know yet. I have to decide if I want to do that before I see if anybody else wants to do it with me. It's the last season, so I don't know. Maybe I'll ask Cookie to see if he's back because I miss Cookie. But that'll do it, guys. No, that show broke, Cookie. That'd be a bad idea. All right. So make sure to check out our website at victorpodcast.com for all sorts of things now that the strikes are over. This is being recorded post-strike. It's a very exciting time because we are releasing everything that we were recording during the strike finally. So a lot of the Victor's watches, a lot of the cinephiles, a lot of the anime stations, blah, 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 are all now coming out. So be sure to check out our website at victorpodcast.com for links that you can find all those shows and their updates. I keep it all up to date. So everything's there. Also, you can check out our TeePublic and our Patreon if you'd like to support us financially. We greatly appreciate the support. You can also check us out every Sunday, I think, going forward, where we just talk about news and stuff. So, good time. Check us out Sunday morning lives. Everything's on our website, though, so which is linked below. Everything's also linked below. We make it really easy for you guys to find us and support us if you want. But we are also on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, all at Victor Podcast. I'm a BT McClure on Instagram and Twitter, where you can also find me writing for atomicgeekdom.com. Xander, where can people find you?
They can find me at Jack in the Box on Twitch.
I love that. And Travis, where can people find you? I almost called you Xander again. One of you needs to change your name. Travis, where can people find you?
You can find me at Captain Travis55 on Twitter. I mean, that's the best place. Kaiju Ramen Magazine is still going for the time being, but we're kind of wrapping things up and bringing that to an end, that chapter of our lives to an end. But that doesn't mean that I'm completely finished with kaiju stuff, because I'm still in love. I still love Justice for Baragon. I still love me some giant monster stuff. So you can always find me online talking about the giant monster stuff.
Just all of a sudden become the emoji with just like the tears streaming down their face. All right, guys. Like and subscribe this video, subscribe to this channel, rate, review wherever you get us on your podcatcher of choice. Your support, as always, is greatly appreciated. Until next time we see us, guys, live long and prosper.